I'm Dr. Rob McKenna, and welcome to the WiLD Conversation, where we make the best thinking in psychology, leadership, and organizational science accessible to leaders who are willing to learn and edit for their sake and for the sake of others. And today we're continuing our series on what executives are really talking about. And this week, the topic is the nuts and bolts of motivation. And I want to give you a quick glimpse into what every organizational behavior text includes. Okay, so I taught organizational behavior, some form of like an intro to industrial organizational psychology for graduate students, taught undergrads for 25 years. And Claire's going to put this in the comments for you, but it just gives you this is what has been studied. And many of you don't know this because we read popular books or something that we get fired up about. These are the topics. Like, these are the things that every student who needs to understand the foundation and research, and most of the textbooks don't actually have the research, but they're citing the research. And if you're in our Executive Fellows program, you're actually reading the research, and so the actual where this all came from. But if you look at some of the things, and Claire's going to list just like a typical textbook, and if you look right in the middle of it, somewhere at about chapter 4, 5, or 6, every one of these textbooks has a whole section on motivation. We actually, in our graduate program, we'd have a whole class on motivation. Like it takes up 10 to 16 weeks to actually cover all these bases. But these are some of the topics we know are critical. And I would say this: what in the world do the nuts and bolts of motivation have to do with what executives and senior leaders are really talking about? And here's what I know. Every leader is interested in motivation on some level because of this very basic definition. Motivation is the desire to act in service of a goal. It's the crucial element in setting and obtaining objectives. In other words, we can't get anything done unless we and others are motivated. Do you hear what I'm saying? Like, it's so critical. That's why are we interested? Because without motivation, the engine does not run. It doesn't run. And so today I want to spend some time. What do we know? What are some of the basics of motivation that are just not talked about that much anymore? And some of that might be because it's been studied so much, but we can't leave all that amazing history and research in the past. We can't. Otherwise, we just jump onto the latest fad and we don't actually lean into what we already know. And so I'm going to cover quite a bit of ground, but I'm going to pick a few motivational theories that have been so critical across organizational theory that have affected the way so many things are done. And if there is one thing that every leader is responsible for on some level, it is for attaining our objectives. It is for attaining our objectives. And motivation is the desire, the energy, the thinking. It is the engine that drives individuals, teams, and organizations toward the achievement of their objectives, like the things they have set out to do, the missional things they set out to do. So we're going to go back to basics. So listen to this. Quote, motivation is one of the most important driving forces behind human behavior. It fuels competition and sparks social connection. Its absence can lead to mental illness, such as depression. Motivation encompasses the desire to continue striving toward meaning, purpose, and a life worth living. That is a quote from Psychology Today. So this is why it's important. It gives me chills reading that. I don't know. It's a big deal, right? And as I said, I spent 25 years teaching this to students. And I would say this more specifically on one Tuesday night in the fall, every fall. I did that for 25. I don't know why. Tuesday nights was my time. And sometimes I was even responsible for teaching it to undergrads. Sometimes they let me do that. And I got to tell you that one of the things that always occurred to my students was the line between, listen to this, they always brought this up, the line between motivating people and manipulating people. It always came up. It's kind of fascinating. In other words, they would ask the question, when does motivation become manipulation? And the reason I think they would ask this was twofold. First, most motivational theories come from the perspective of someone, typically a manager or a parent or some other leader, attempting to motivate others to do or think something different. Do you hear me? Like, it's written from the research is from the perspective of someone trying to motivate someone else. And so it's not surprising that they might see that as manipulation. But here's the other reason. Then layer on top of that, the reality that many of my undergraduate students had never been in the formal position of leader or manager. And you quickly realize why they might see motivating others as manipulation tactics. You know what I mean? It's like, because they haven't been in that position where I've got to do this. Like, They haven't seen that yet. And here's the whole story of motivation. Because here at WiLD, whole and intentional leader development. So we're going to get the whole story. Motivation is absolutely necessary to understand if you are a leader or a manager of people. And we know a lot. We know a lot. In fact, it is one of the most studied areas of organizational behavior and industrial organizational psychology. So let's geek out just a little bit, all right? So before we start into the theories, I want to throw down the gauntlet of a couple of foundational assumptions that tend to cross all models or theories of motivation. One is this. Number one is individuals have the potential for agency, but some don't realize it. There are always, and there are ways we can reduce agency, because agency is typically not commanded, it is invited with open arms. We don't realize that we can do something by being told we can, at least not typically. We realize we can do something by being asked about whether or not we've done something successful in the past. Like when we're invited to see the way we've done things in the past. Number two, motivation. Listen to this. Motivation is neither good nor bad. It is a neutral thing. I could create or invite a desire in you, or someone else could do this, or we could do this for people, or an energy toward things that most of us would consider rather destructive. Do you hear me? It's not a good or a bad thing. It's like it's a thing. And we have to just put that on the table. And for that reason, I say that we are stewards of motivation and not blind creators of it. We are stewards of motivation and not blind creators of it. And then number three, motivation happens at the individual level, but can be escalated by groups of people moving in the same direction. So typically it's been studied as an individual thing. It happens within a person, and then that becomes a social psychological thing as we do something together. And then number four, sustained motivation is probably more than simple desire. Do you hear what I'm saying? Like, it's one thing to motivate someone to do a task. What about long-term sustained motivation that might be driven by deeper things like purpose, stewardship, obedience, and even faith? If motivation is only short-term, it might miss the point, but short-term wins matter for the long-term impact. And so with those things in place, let me give you a couple of, I just want to introduce, are you ready? Like, get your notepads out. If you want, something I say is important, and Claire will put things in the comments, but here we go. The first thing I want to cover is the job characteristics model. Some of you know what I'm talking about. This is one of the most studied pieces of motivation. And this is all about the job. It's related to the characteristics of the job. And it was studied so much, like through the 70s and 80s, it's kind of unbelievable. And it was Hackman and Oldman are the authors, those of you who want names and citations. But let me tell you what this said. What this said was that there are 5 key job characteristics. So for you in a practical sense, here's what I would say. If you want to design jobs that are motivating, here's what the JCM, the job characteristics model, would say. Number 1, skill variety. The degree to which the job requires the use of different skills and talents. So skill variety. If you can have a job that has, and by the way, you don't have to have like a crazy exciting job to build some variety in. Okay. Number 2, task identity. The degree to which the job has contributed to a clearly identifiable larger project. So if a person can see the way that what they're doing connects to a bigger project, if I'm building a car, if I can see how my screwing in that spark plug affects, do we still have spark plugs? Probably not for much longer. You know what I'm saying? Well, I'm dating myself, right? So it's like the spark plug, if I can see how that job connects to, hey, someone drove a car, it matters. Number 3, task significance, the degree to which the job affects the lives or work of other people. And I don't care who you are. Like when I talk to people, I do this often because we work with organizations in the plumbing industry, and some of you are here, and I'm like, do you know that you put water in my house? You know, it's like, it's a big deal, the work that they do. So that matters to people. In terms of a job, number 4, autonomy, the degree to which the worker has independence, freedom, and discretion in carrying out the job. So people need some sense of, I have some autonomy in how I do it. Doesn't mean complete autonomy, but some. And then finally, task feedback, the degree to which the person, technically in the past it was called the worker, it's that funny, is provided with clear, specific, detailed, and actionable information about the effectiveness of his or her job performance. And I just have this one example of this is like Megan Lawrence, that many of you know, is the leader of our marketing and events at WiLD Leaders. And one of the things that she holds is the experience of the WiLD conversation, like what you're experiencing today. And so to the extent that her job, and I thought through this as I was preparing for this, has those 5 characteristics in model or in place, the idea would be it would be more motivating. Okay, so the job does matter. But let's take this one step further. Okay, so the first part would mean what we know is that the characteristics of the jobs that you are designing matter. So thinking about those 5 things matter. Another theory close related to the job characteristics model, because of it's still a focus on external factors typically, is what's called Hertzberg's 2-factor theory. And I've described this in the WiLD conversation before, but Hertzberg had some interesting findings. And the biggest thing that I want you to take away from this is this: that he found that the things that keep a person from being dissatisfied are different from the things that make them really satisfied and really motivated. Do you hear me? That was kind of important because we used to assume that something like motivation was on this continuum. But what he found was this, and this is one of the biggest findings that I tell leaders all the time: money will keep you from being dissatisfied, but it will never take you into the deepest levels of motivation. Do you hear me? And I cannot tell you, if you listen to people in organizations all the time, their working assumption is that money is the primary motivator. It is a hygiene factor, but it takes more than that to motivate people to the next level. Things like having a great and inspiring manager and getting feedback on your role and doing meaningful work. Those are the things that take people into 4s, 5s, and 6s on, their levels of motivation. So that was Hertzberg's connection. So now imagine we got the job characteristics. Now we got Hertzberg saying, like, let's make sure we're thinking about things right. Okay, we got those things going on. But here's another piece. I want to give you just a couple more pieces of this. So something that many of you have heard about often is sort of the concept of goals, right? So job characteristics matter. Money is not the only thing. We need these other kinds of pieces to make our jobs really motivating. We also know a lot of things about goals. That we know that goals, and I want to talk about 2 things together. I want to talk about goal theory and expectancy theory. And goals, we've heard this before, like the concept of SMART goals. And by the way, the researcher that's our friend, Gary Latham, like, he didn't term SMART goals. He just did the research on what's actually behind that, and someone else coined the term SMART goals. But we know that difficult, specific goals matter, achievable goals matter, that shared goals matter. But we also know that in order to get people really motivated, they have to see the connection between what they're doing and the results they not only can get, but that they want. And so in comes this research around what's called expectancy theory. And this is one of the most applied theories that people really don't necessarily know they're applying when they're doing it well. But this is really getting down to this idea that I need to get into the mind of my people. Okay, and expectancy theory is about this, that in order for someone to be motivated toward a goal, it needs to have 3 things in place: valence, expectancy, and instrumentality. I know those are big words. Those are big words for me. But let me tell you what they mean. People are motivated by things they value. That's what valence is. That's my bottom shelf definition. And that means you need to know what people value, and they value different things. Okay, point number 1, see your people. Number 2, expectancy. They need to have a reasonable expectation of success if they put forth effort. And how do you build an expectation of success? Small wins, right? Like where they see the connection between what they're doing, where they're putting effort, and the goals that they're going after, okay? And then instrumentality is this. The third part of expectancy theory is that effort will lead to something I value. Now, what's interesting about this to me is that what it puts the onus on leaders to know their people and to provide pathways for people to be able to see their successes. Do you hear what I'm saying? It's like we have to understand what it is that people value, and people value different things. And this is why sometimes I think why life can be so demotivating. It's like sometimes we put forth effort that does not lead to the outcomes we desire, and we become demotivated. This is why, like, the silly idea of love language was so brilliant. If people gave, people even in marriages a way to put themselves in the shoes of another to actually understand and reward things that they actually value, then they might get the behaviors that they're hoping from their spouse. Or maybe I'm oversimplifying it. But so you imagine job characteristics is one piece. People are motivated by different things. And then let's see our people. Let's see them for what they value. Let's make linkages between their efforts and getting the rewards that they're looking after. And so I want to introduce one other thing. And then I'm going to you all are smart people that will go into this conversation and create linkages where you see value for yourself. But the other thing I want to mention is enter the modern day growth mindset. Some of you are like big growth mindset geeks. All right. And I love that. The real finding of the growth mindset movement launched by Carol Dweck was not this. It was not have a growth mindset. That's what we often hear from stages, from speakers. You should have a growth mindset. Let's have a growth mindset. But you know what the real finding was? The reality that those who believe that they can change and learn and grow do better over the long haul. People who believe that they can. So the question is, how do we help people believe they can change, learn, and grow? And what Carol Dweck found is that literally the way you talk to people can change their mindset. So this is why Daniel and I find it problematic when people put you in a personality box. Because when they do, these same people often jump all over the growth mindset concept. When we talk to people, we found that within 3 or 4 minutes, a manager can change a person's mindset simply by the way they talk to people. And so it's one thing. And so that's just an important part of that. And then I also want to finish with this. If you want a huge glimpse into some of the cutting edge work that's out there, this is something that we have done within WiLD Leaders. Is that people are motivated to learn by different things and in different ways. This is why one of the tools in the WiLD Toolkit is the motivational learning inventory, because what's been found in the research is that people, do you hear me? People are motivated to learn in different ways. And so if we saw our people better, because the bottom line is this, structure the jobs well according to those 5 things and it'll help. But most of what motivational theory is about since then has been about seeing our people better, which is precisely why WiLD Leaders does a long-term investment in teams, seeing one another better, understanding their motivations, understanding the experiences that they want, understanding their purpose and their call, understanding their build out of their strategic networks. So that's a lot to chew on, I know, but I hope it gives you great handholds. And so the point of this is always not to hear just something from me, but let's keep the conversation going.